The story begins with a book called Karuo's Doll. It all started with an attack of insanity that began in the main character, Grand Duke Karuo. The princely Karuo family has a lineage where insanity manifests as early as their teenage years. The insanity subsided as they grew up and reached adulthood. However, there is a serious problem where the insanity escalates and destroys them before they even reach adulthood. Insanity can be calmed by biting a witch while being in roughly this close proximity to her. Upon learning this, the girl began to hate the radish, in whom she saw what might be her sisters. She developed resentment at the strange shape of the vegetable. She doesn't even want to think about the fact that this is the only way to stop the Karuo family's madness. Since her sister is not yet of age, it's very difficult for the girl to talk and see everything that's involved. She's afraid that sooner or later, Estella will be hurt by someone who has this problem. Because of this, she gets nervous even when her sister is socializing or being around some guy. Meanwhile, Estella walked over to her sister, for she happened to notice that she looked quite pale. The girl began to take her temperature, and decided she'd had enough for the day. Estella takes care of her sister a lot, and worries about her not working too much. Sometimes, the little sister wishes she had the problem, but the kindest and most beautiful older sister in the world, whom she feels sorry for, because she has the main role in this crazy evil story. According to the story, the protagonist was never able to hold back and control his desires. He would go to her sister and do something that would at least help him calm the madness. In the end, the hapless heroine, Estella Kratia, meets her doom alone in a dark underground dungeon. Her life is ruined and ends in a very tragic way, such as her hard fate, which no one could influence. The younger sister decided that something had to be done about it. She couldn't just sit back and watch beautiful and sweet Estella, who had never done anything bad to anyone, die horribly. She came up to her and said she already knew what she wanted for her birthday. Estella didn't listen and suggested a small picnic. They had been planning it for a long time, and it was her birthday. It was the perfect occasion to fulfill that little dream. The little sister got angry and said that she didn't mean it at all. Very unexpectedly, the girl says that if Estella ran away from home right in the middle of the night, it would be the best present ever. Hearing this, Estella thought it was some kind of joke, though in fact, in this way, her sister really wants to change the plot. The girl didn't understand what it meant and why it was so important for her sister to run away from home at night. Meanwhile, Karuo's house. It's very dark, gloomy as usual, and even has an intimidating atmosphere in the air. The guy has nothing new. He's walking around the house and doesn't know where he can find someone to help ease his suffering. It's like starving in an environment where there is no food or where it's hard to access. People do not come even close to his house. Those who at least once heard about his madness are wary of him. And as soon as they know that he has left the house or is going to go to a public place, everyone starts to hide in their houses and lock their doors with 10 locks. Especially girls. Especially pretty girls of legal age that he might like. Meanwhile, Estella still refuses to do what her sister asked her to do as her birthday present. Lily came up to her every half hour and reminded her how important it was to her, without explaining what she wanted to accomplish by doing so. Since then, a whole week had passed. Whenever the opportunity arose, the girl would go to her sister and ask if she had changed her mind about the gift. She did so even when the girl lay down to rest and began breakfast. Lately, she had never been alone together, for her sister would not leave her alone in any way. She doesn't know what to do about it anymore. But at the same time, she doesn't want to agree and run away from home at night. Because at the very least, she doesn't even know what it's for. Lily asked for it so often that her sister couldn't stand it, and at one point, for the first time, yelled at her. She was tired of being followed and not being alone with her. Even her room has become a place without tranquility. Wherever she goes, she is haunted everywhere by lilies. At one point, the younger sister started thinking again about what would happen if she didn't tell her to do it. She dreads to think of a plot in which Estella will be all alone, in the dark, in tears, with no chance of getting out. Because of the guy who ruined her life, the sisters and started treating him better even after they found out that he, very handsome and rich. Lily had finally decided that no matter how hard it was, she had to save her sister, even if it wasn't possible. Suddenly she had an idea to get a job, make a lot of money, and then run away together. Estella thought that if her sister really wanted it so badly, it would be a good idea. But there was one problem. Without experience, it would be impossible to find, and even more impossible to get a job. Lily said that she had already found a vacancy for a maid, and that it was not necessary to have a lot of experience, so it would be easy to get a job and not as difficult as it seemed at first sight. Lily said that if her sister trusted her, they would have no trouble at all. She would take care of all the difficulties, and Estella would only have to fulfill her duties, or at least a minimum part of them. The younger sister asked not to ask too many questions, and promised that Estella would soon find out what it was all about and understand what it was all about. She doesn't have the energy to think for two people, especially when her sister refuses to change her mind and won't make concessions. At which point, the older sister asked the younger sister to stop acting like a child. At that moment, one of them hears someone approaching the room down the hall. The girls start to turn around. It turns out that the father has come home. He's in a terrible state as usual. The twins have been used to seeing him like this for a long time now. Every time he comes home, the sisters are wary of him and go outside for a walk. But since it's evening, they had to stay and watch him quietly from the sidelines. If he had behaved calmly and ignored them, it would have been very good. But unfortunately, in such a state, he was not happy even with his own children. The man asked what they were doing here, and ordered to make sure that in a second, there would be none of them in this room. And that's not all. My father began to call them such words as if he saw enemies or those he couldn't tolerate. The younger sister hid behind the older sister's back, and once again became convinced that there were no normal men in this world. She didn't know a single one who treated girls well and didn't want to hurt them. It's strange that they still don't want to move out and live apart from this man. He has his own life that has no place for his own children. Lily doesn't understand why the older sister refuses to run away from home. After all, doesn't she enjoy living in the same house with that person? At some point, the father noticed that she was hiding from him, and the second she did, he lost control. The man threw a bottle in her direction, and as soon as it flew past, it made him even more angry. Her older sister immediately started sticking up for her. She pushed her father away and asked him to go to her room. She reminded him that they were his children, and asked how he could behave in such a way toward them. They had put up with it for years, and had never once said a bad word to him. I wonder if there was even one day where he was in complete control of himself and treated them at least calmly, not to mention saying how much he loved them or was interested in them, if they had any problems. Finally, he turned around and started walking away, and in that second, his daughters were much calmer, because when he's around, they have a constant feeling of anxiety. Meanwhile, the older sister turned around and looked at the younger sister. She saw that she still couldn't get to her feet, and for some reason, she was looking at the floor. Looks like her father did hit her, and hurt her very badly. Lily doesn't react to her sister's questions and doesn't even move. Estella ran up to her and asked her to look at her, but in response, the girl didn't react in any way for a few more seconds. And then asked just one question. How much longer would they put up with this? She was tired of having to hide and be afraid of her own father even at home. She said she was very lucky today. He couldn't leave any wounds, but it's unknown if she'll behave the same way next time. Estella doesn't even know what to say to that, because to move, you need to think everything over, and at least make a minimum plan of what to do next, where to get money, and where to go. When suddenly, very unexpectedly, she still agreed to her proposal and offered to run away. Apparently, she was also tired of living in such conditions and wanted to change her life for the better. But there's one problem. If their father notices they're gone, he'll go straight out to look for them. So, they'll have to do it really fast and run as far away as possible. Instead of going away as soon as they thought of it, they began to hesitate again. Supposedly it was bad to leave their father in such a state, but the way they felt in his presence, the girls forgot. After that, the conversation began that he who could not leave his father would stay here and wait for his sister when she had made enough money. The girls are finally confused, because they cannot decide what is more important to them, their own safety or how their father will live alone. Although in fact, most likely, he just does not care about them. It's very interesting what they will decide, because if they want to act and change their lives, they need to do it right now, without thinking and making up excuses to stay and not risk anything. Lily hinted that if they didn't take a chance now and try to fix things, then it might be too late, and the two of them would regret doing it now. She saw no point in staying with a father who didn't need them. However, Lily had some business to attend to. She promised that as soon as she was done, she would go straight after her. But for now, only Estella was leaving. The guy they woke up in the morning and told about their plan was very stunned. He didn't expect to hear such news. The girls have never done something like this before. He is scared, but at the same time, he realizes that it's best for everyone. In the end, he accepted the situation and started to help as much as he could. He suggested a short route, transportation to get there, and just advice that is never unnecessary. And that's not all. The guy imagined how scary it would be for the girl alone, so he offered to go with her. The girl, without hesitation, immediately agreed, because it's a very good idea since he suggested it. Why not? After gathering all her things, Estella went up to her sister and said that she would wait for her. She really hoped that she wouldn't have to stay here for long, and very soon they would meet in another city. The girl realizes that most likely, due to studies and other things, her sister will need to stay for at least a few months. They have never been without each other for so long. Estella said that she will write letters very often and be in touch with her. The thing is, in the original story, Estella says she'll sacrifice herself to protect her little sister. But whether it will really be like that and what she will have to protect her from, you can see much later. But now, they have to say goodbye, but for a very long time. It's actually very strange that her little sister needs so much time to work out some of her own affairs. Could she have tricked her and really, Lily will never come to see her? Very interesting what will happen next, and what the younger sister is up to. I hope it's all to save the older sister. Maybe Lily knows something and deliberately made her sister leave, so nothing bad would happen to her here. There's another very important point that the girl might have forgotten. All this time, her sister has been protecting her from her father, and now she's alone with him. So something has to be done about it. All the while, as her elder sister looked at her on the road, Lily smiled and pretended that all was well, as if they would see each other soon, and there would be no trouble. But as soon as her sister had gone round the corner of the... Lily exhaled and couldn't continue smiling. It's so hard for her to say goodbye to Estella that the girl started crying and almost fainted. She doesn't know how to be here alone without her protection and support. I really wonder what she's doing this for, because so far it looks very sad. It's like she's letting her sister go to a better life, sacrificing herself so she doesn't have to leave her father and stay here forever. Since she hasn't told anyone, it's hard to know why she's doing this, because so far she's the only one suffering. At that moment, Lily tried to calm herself down and thought about the fact that the main thing was that her sister had gone to a safe place, but she didn't know what to do next. Literally after a second, the girl stops crying. She has a very unexpected and risky idea, namely, to lock up her father and make it so that he can never hurt or even offend anyone again. The biggest problem was that her father had said more than once that of his two daughters. He hated the younger one the most, so the older one always had to protect her. The man sometimes listened to Estella and left Lily alone. It turns out it's for a reason. The reason he hates his youngest daughter is because she looks a lot like her mom. Lily is an exact copy of her. Her mom died when she was very young. Even her older sister says she vaguely remembers what their mom looked like. The girls always wanted to find a picture of her, but at the time, there was no such thing. Actually, it's very unfair. It's not Lily's fault that she looks a lot like her mom, and even more so that their father had a big fight with her and started hating her, and consequently the younger daughter who reminds him of her every day. Meanwhile, Lily thinks she has successfully completed her mission. She has locked her father's room and is sure that he will not come out again, although it looks very doubtful. The door is only propped up by a few chairs, flowers, and some big black object. It looks very insecure, though perhaps the man is so weak that he cannot open the door even with such obstacles as any woman can easily handle. It's a week after her birthday. Someone should be coming knocking on the door any day now. Lily heard a knock, took a chance and decided to open the door. because maybe someone remembered her birthday and came to congratulate her from the morning. She opens the door and sees the guy in front of her, only for some reason. He's looking at her too mysteriously, like he was expecting someone else, or didn't think anyone would open the door for him at all. The plot starts with the arrival of someone from the family of a major duke, and it seems that this moment has arrived. Only for some reason, he was too surprised by the pink color of her hair. Lily felt very uncomfortable, because she saw him looking at her from all sides. She did not know how to behave and how to ask him what he had come for, and who he was in general. It's a bit strange, because at least he should introduce himself and explain what he's interested in and how the girl can help him. Instead, they just look at each other and don't understand what's going on. Lily looked at her hair and wondered if it had a special look and attracted more attention than she did, because the guy hadn't even looked her in the eye once. In fact, pink stripes is a great rarity in this world. Accordingly, the girl is the only one in whom he saw this beautiful and unusual hair color. Perhaps she is his place, so would react like this to anyone who sees for the first time. The girl didn't even think about it until she remembered the story. But unfortunately, there's very little information about it. She doesn't even know if it's bad that she has that hair or not. After a while, the guy apologized for forgetting to introduce himself, and then immediately said his name, Orie. He admitted that he didn't expect to see such a special and beautiful girl, so didn't know how to react to it. It turns out Orie works in the Duke's palace. The girl recognized him, for he is the same man who kidnapped Renatus in the original novel and used Nair as a hostage to get Estella to listen to himself. The guy wondered if the girl was not surprised that someone from the Duke's family had come knocking on her door. Meanwhile, she pretended not to know anything, and in order not to arouse suspicion, asked what had brought him here from the Duke's estate. In response, Orie said that he had something he wanted to tell her, very curious whether the girl would be happy about it or, on the contrary, would be very upset about it. Lily doesn't know if she even wants to hear it, because he probably won't say anything nice and she'll end up losing her mood. Because of fear, she started saying some words that didn't make any sense. She thought to herself that everything was very bad and started to get nervous beforehand, even though the guy didn't say a single word. At some point, wakes up the father of the girl and starts screaming to let him out of the room. This is heard by a guest. He asked who is inside, and at this point, Lily does not know how to react to this. She does not want anyone to know that she locked her father in his room, especially the reason. She said that her father was at home with her, and afterward, she asked him to ignore him. She had purposely closed the door so that he could no longer be heard, and so that he would not suddenly tell her that he was locked in the room. Lily was getting nervous. Things weren't going according to plan. She was afraid to imagine what would happen if somehow Orie found out the truth and told someone else about it. In the end, a miracle happened, and he said that he didn't want to know anything about it, because it was none of his business, and he had come here for a different reason. The girl was pleased and said that she wanted to finally get to the point of the conversation. Orie asked that she let her speak to him as it was, and not communicate in innuendos, for that would only delay each other, and no one would understand either of them. In fact, he wants her to go with him to the Duke's palace. But for what and for how long? The guy does not say. This is a very unexpected proposal, because the girl did not plan to go anywhere. She doesn't know if she should accept, because if the Duke has asked her to do it, it could be good news or bad news. She doesn't know what's in store for her, and she's afraid of making a mistake. In the original story, the guy who is now talking to Lily didn't know either of the sisters and had to suggest it to Estella. Now I see why the girl was hiding her name and was afraid to say anything unnecessary. Apparently that was her plan. She sent her sister to another city and decided to pretend she was the older sister so she could go to the Mad Duke and suffer in her place. Meanwhile, she continued to pretend and pretended that she had been waiting for this proposal all her life. The girl said that of course, she would gladly go to the palace right now, though she's actually very scared. But for her sister's sake, she's willing to do it so long as she's okay. Since Estella has taken care of her little sister all her life, Lily reads that it's her turn. It turns out that the girl knew that around this time, This guy would come to her and offer to go to the Duke's estate. I wonder when he would notice, and if there would be such a thing that everyone would find out the truth. At some point, the girl began to remember where she should first meet the Mad Duke. She remembered very well that the protagonist of a novel she had read in a past life had seen him in some small room. Meanwhile, right after Lily agreed to go to the palace with him, the guards joined them and were ordered to make sure that the girl didn't go anywhere, which made her even more nervous and thought that she was being led into a trap. She has little faith that these people are those who can be trusted, because the Duke's staff can offer nothing good. So, with each step, in the girl's mind there are images that make her feel uncomfortable. She started to ask different questions, but now, Orie started to pretend that he stopped noticing her, even though he was literally a meter away from her. Despite the fact that the girl knows the plot very well, she still has feelings that she was deceived by someone and is being led to a place from which she will never be able to get out. Even if she really wants to, she wonders how the main character felt. Because now, except for fear and panic, Lily does not have any sensations. After a while, she was led to a door, as if to a room, which was not unlike a room where people are locked up and not allowed to go free. Lily thought that she would be politely asked to come in and there would be someone waiting for her. But in fact, Orie pushed her very hard with all his might and did not say a single word. It was very unexpected and hurtful because not so long ago, he was smiling and pretending to be trustworthy. It was very rude of him, though you could have at least given a warning or words instead of pushing a girl who had done him no wrong. It's hard to imagine that if the staff is as rude as their master would turn out to be. Lily doesn't understand how he could do that to her. She wasn't afraid to say it out loud, and in response, the guy told her to keep her mouth shut and do what she was brought here to do, even though he didn't even tell her about it. At the very last moment, as the door was closing, he explained very quietly that her mission, to calm some person inside, if of course she could do that. Left alone, the girl was very frightened, because it is unknown what he means. She became very scared and wanted to try to get out, although it is a very dubious idea, because there are too many guards and guards around, which are watching for it. She started banging on the door very loudly and talking about how he couldn't do this to her, and at the very least, someone should take care of her mental training. Lily regretted that she had agreed to come here, because it was probably better to leave her sister in a neighboring town where no one would find her or even look for her. But unfortunately, it was time to return, and since she was here, she had to take responsibility for her decision. Over time, the girl has come to terms with the fact that no one will let her out of here. She is very afraid that her psyche will not withstand such pressure, and sooner or later something bad will happen. Lily turned around, looked around, and realized that she would have to stay here for at least a few days, maybe even months. Now she realized that this was really a trap, and she would only be able to get out of it if a miracle happened. Estella is the girl the protagonist has fallen in love with, and all the sisters have in common is pink hair. Other than that, according to the younger sister, there is no resemblance between them. The only thing to fear is that suddenly, the Duke will see the difference and realize that this is not the one he was waiting for. Though on the other hand, she still has hope that maybe the Duke can't fall in love with her and decides to let her go from his estate to find another, the one he wants. Either way, she has no choice but to stay and see this man, no matter how much she wants to. As suddenly, out of nowhere appeared the very Duke she had just been thinking about. After that, the girl recalls the words of his assistant afterward, that she should calm him down. A man appeared in front of her who looks like a real beast. Lily couldn't help herself and started crying. She's afraid he could destroy her right here and now. Plus, he's in such a state that he looks like he's about to pass out, so unsteady on his feet and unable to find the strength to look her in the eye. His name is Theodore, the heir who will inherit the Duke's lineage. His red eyes and gaze seem to tell at once what kind of man he is, and show the problem that has plagued him all his life. Now he is suffering from insanity, and no one knows if there is a way to help him once and for all. It is believed that it can only be done once, so people like Lily are invited to him to put him out of his misery, at least for a while. He really likes beautiful and unusual girls with something special about them. so Lily is exactly what he needs. As soon as the girl saw his fangs, she immediately realized that the worst was beginning. There was no one around, and she was alone, against this madman, from whom you never know what to expect. At some point, he starts coming closer and closer, and looking at her like he's about to do something he's been waiting for his whole life. According to the story, Estella, who first met Theodore, looked at his handsome face and was perplexed by the strangeness of his crazy and red eyes, which did not suit him at all. And as soon as she thought about it, the guy started to approach her like something he'd been forbidden and not given much time with. Except that in the original story, it was so horrible and violent that if the same thing happened now, in a few seconds, Lily wouldn't be alive. But now, she was very lucky. Theodore had only left a few wounds and ruined her clothes. Things were much better and safer than they could have been if things had been as they were in the original story. So she wasn't at all confused by what had just happened. Lily was glad she was alive at all. As soon as the guy had done a few wounds, immediately stepped aside. But really, was that enough to calm his madness? Very interesting what will happen next, because most likely this is not all. If everything was so simple and quick, the helpers would not be looking for the most beautiful and unusual girl for him. The worst part is that he doesn't even talk to her or tell her what he's going to do. And since his movements are very abrupt, Lily doesn't have time to react in time and understand what to expect. At some point, Theodore smelled an unusual odor and said he wanted to smell it all the time. The girl didn't understand what it meant. Did he really like the smell of her wound? He's really bad at talking. The girl can barely make out the sounds she hears. He's obviously very bad. Well, understandable judging by his voice. At this point, Lily decided that since he could and did talk, she suggested that he talk like an adult and make a deal to keep everyone happy, because she was tired of being afraid and not knowing what was going to happen next. As suddenly, right after these words, she abruptly turned around and started to run away. The girl called him an animal and in tears tried to get free. The guy reacted in time and started to catch up with her. But did she find a way out and know where to hide? Since Lily can only navigate here thanks to her memories from the story, it's amazing that she decided and found the strength to take such a risk. Because by doing so, she made the Mad Duke even more angry. It turns out she doesn't have any plan at all. The girl starts running from him around this small room, hoping that it will help at least somehow. But in fact, there's no point in it. She's only making it worse. At one point, she stumbles and falls to the floor. Lily is frightened and thinks that at this point, it's safe to assume that she won't survive the rest of the day. Taking advantage of the moment, the guy immediately runs up, grabs her arm, and instead of helping her, starts to hurt her again. Lily realizes that it's useless to resist. She realized that if she runs away because she'll make him even angrier. She wondered how often he needed to hurt her to make her feel better, since it hadn't been more than a few minutes since the last time. At this rate, there wouldn't be a live spot left on her. Lily tried to push him away, but she failed. He was so strong that it was just useless. She was only wasting her strength that way. She, of course, that he has serious problems and this man can rarely control himself. But she didn't think it was that bad. She even thought she couldn't have a normal conversation with him. Lily looks at this and realizes that if she doesn't try to defend herself, she will soon have no arm. She decides that before she dies, she needs to at least push him away and try to defend herself. At that moment, the girl remembers her sister, and it's only because she realizes that she's okay now, and Estella is safe that she feels a little better, realizing that everything that's happening right now is for her own good. When suddenly, she feels the strength of the bite has become much weaker than it was the first time. But what it means, she does not understand. It doesn't hurt her at all now. But does it have anything to do with the fact that now he's not crazy enough to hurt her? But now she knows that every time she does it, it won't hurt as much as it did at the beginning of the day. She'll have to be patient the first time, and then it won't hurt as bad as it seemed. Theodore, the main character, is a male suffering from insanity. As soon as he meets the heroine of the novel, he immediately becomes attached to her and cannot let go. He has been described as a beast-like man, focused solely on greed and the desire to be with her. After the first meeting, The guy starts to think only that it was always with him and stayed here for the rest of his life. He no longer thinks about other girls and does everything to ensure that this one remains with him forever, even if she does not want it. At this point, when the girl realized it wasn't going to hurt anymore, she started to look at his face and hands. He had a lot of scratches, broken nails, and chapped hands. But even now, she can't stop trying to call for help and hoping that there's someone out there who can save her. She had never felt so alone and defenseless in a strange, unfamiliar place before. It's very dark and scary here. Lily regretted agreeing to come to this palace for the first time. She doesn't understand how, knowing what was going to happen next, she didn't refuse or encourage to avoid it. Besides, there's no telling how many times a day she'll be approached by this madman. The main thing is that he doesn't do anything new that the girl isn't ready for yet. She's scared to even think about the fact that this is just the beginning. Even his staff doesn't know what this man is capable of or what he plans to do to her. At some point, she reaches out her hand and comes up with a little plan. The girl decides it's okay to take a risk. Lily wasn't afraid. She hugged him and told him he was fine. She complimented him and tried to comfort him with words, like a mom who is worried about her child. The girl saw him as a little boy who perhaps cannot accept the death of his mother and therefore unconsciously became so crazy. Perhaps he himself is not to blame, and her behavior as his mother. This is a way to calm this madman. Surprisingly, as soon as she started saying nice words, hugging him and acting like a real mom, he immediately felt better. He calmed down, and even his eyes changed. The girl doesn't understand how she could even think of such a thing, but for now, everything is going according to plan. She noticed that his eye color has changed. Now it's not red, but blue. In front of her, it's like a completely different person who changed in 1 second. There's not an ounce of madness in him. At least that's how it looks from the outside. Even the atmosphere in this room had changed. It was much more pleasant to be here and even hugging this guy. Lily couldn't even think that this was a very good idea. If she had known, she would have done it right away. At one point, she noticed that he seemed to freeze in one place and stop moving. She looked at him and realized that Theodore. He felt safe, calmed down, and fell asleep beside his mother like a little child. It's just impossible to believe it. If you tell someone, no one will believe it. The girl doesn't understand if it's good or bad, but at least he's asleep and not looking at her with aggressive eyes. The original story said that Theodore harmed the girl until she passed out at dawn. Lily put him on his feet to rest comfortably, and he definitely didn't wake up. It meant she had time to think things over well and conclude how and what to do next. The girl was thinking that in reality there are too many differences from the original story, and she doesn't know whether it's good or bad when suddenly, at that very moment, some creature that looks like a pink ball appears near her. It greeted the girl, and as soon as she looked in its direction, she was very much frightened. She thought she was hallucinating or something, for she had never seen such a thing before. Lily doesn't understand what's going on because she can't remember that there was anything unusual in the story. Because if there had been, she would have remembered it. In the book, Caro Doll, there were no monsters or magic. Caro's family has suffered from insanity for generations. When insanity appears, the eyes immediately turn red. Accordingly, since his eyes are now a beautiful blue color, that means the madness is gone. We can only hope it doesn't come again anytime soon. Meanwhile, Lily can't remember what it is, which makes her even more nervous. She is most alarmed by the fact that this creature can talk. At one point, the orb becomes indignant and asks how dare the girl call him a creature. Because in fact, he is a powerful demon who can destroy. It's very hard to believe. Sight for sight, there's nothing wrong with it. This little demon isn't even a terrifying dark or red color. As the girl didn't know what to answer, the demon started to get angry and asked for her to say or answer him anything at all. In order not to make him angry, she asked him to tell a little more about himself, especially why he was here and whether he could be counted on for help. The orb replied that his name was Sujin from that moment on. His mood had improved noticeably. Apparently he liked talking to someone, and especially talking about himself. The girl starts asking him for more information, but for some reason, for every question, He says his name over and over again. In the end, Sujin suddenly disappeared, as if he had vanished into thin air, because he didn't even say goodbye. And the girl was upset because she thought that he could help her and had come to do just that. She was left alone with Theodore, so she had to sit for a few more hours. She didn't even notice it was evening, and she spent the whole day here. In the meantime, the next day came. Theodore was helped to his office, and in the morning, he started to feel very sick again. He started calling for his assistant to do something. His eyesight immediately deteriorated. The guy stopped standing steadily on his feet and felt as if he had lost his ability to speak. He can't even pronounce the name of his assistant. Instead of the staff, his father came. The guy started asking for help, but for some reason the man started to ignore him. He silently watches his son suffering and does nothing. It turned out that it had always been so. Theodore knew that it was pointless to give anything from his father, for he had never had an ounce of regret for his child, or indeed for other people. The man began to remind about the death of his second son, and hinted that if the boy could not do anything about his madness, the same thing would happen to him as to his brother, except that the father himself was not going to take part in it. In all that time, he hadn't found a single cure for him, or even tried to do so. Before he left to go about his business, he only asked his son for one thing: not to destroy some sorceress. Is it really about Lily? Though perhaps it's not true. Theodore looked at him and didn't answer a single word. He was disgusted to hear his voice, much less agree to do what he was asking him to do. After that, the man didn't say goodbye and silently went about his business, at which point the deputies arrived. They noticed that something was wrong with the gentleman. They approached him, and it was very timely, because it was the very moment when the guy lost consciousness. He felt that he had no support and help from the closest person, so he got worse. Now I see why Theodore became such a man. For it was impossible for him to become a kind and sweet fellow under such conditions. Though in fact, he is not so cruel as his father. It turned out that Theodore was aware that Duke Caro did not recognize him. The man was the kind of father who never once spoke a warm word, much less helped with any problems, even with his health, to his child. So he was constantly trying to cope with his problem. But he could not do anything, because of the cruel environment, he was never in a good mood and had no reason to calm down for a day. It was such that he could not even control his hand. Because it had claws on it, he often scratched his face and could not do anything about it. It's amazing that a father who had the same problem doesn't feel an ounce of regret and doesn't try to help his child. It's as if he's glad he's not the only one who had to suffer and experience this horrible feeling for most of his life. So the moment the girl said it was all right, hugged him and said she would try to help, he felt more pleased than ever. The last time he had heard such words was when his mother was still alive. Theodore felt so good that he felt as if the madness had disappeared without a trace of it. But was it really just care and good words that he had been missing all this time? For perhaps that might have saved him from madness, while his father, doing exactly the opposite, had only made things worse and spoiled his life. Meanwhile, he wakes up in his room, and even now, he remembers the situation. Once he heard Lily's gentle and pleasant voice. The assistant came to him at once and asked if he needed any help, because usually, right after sleeping, Theodore feels the worst of it. But surprisingly, he didn't even complain about anything. His pain was gone and he felt like he was back to being a normal person. He just can't believe it. Theodore started to look at his hands, and surprisingly all the scratches were gone. Something incredible had happened. Did it really only take a few nice words and a hug to cure his insanity? A guy who missed it so much? As soon as he realized he had that girl helping him, he immediately asked where she was now and wanted to see her. The assistant said she was locked in a room, so definitely not going anywhere. After hearing this information, Theodore got up from the bed very abruptly and started running towards her. He didn't say a single word, and it seems that he has a lot of questions. At least now, he definitely can't and won't want to hurt her, so the girl can be calm. The important thing is that he doesn't think he feels better after hurting her, because that's probably what he thinks, and that's very bad and dangerous. He opens the door and of course sees her in this room. The girl is awake and has been waiting for him for a long time, very curious about what will happen next, and if he will hurt her again. At this point, Lily didn't even look in his direction. She turned her back and didn't say a single word. The girl is afraid to do something unnecessary, because there's no telling what kind of mood he's in right now. At this point, so as not to anger him further, she said that today there would be no resistance, and he could do whatever he wanted. Theodore is surprised because he's used to seeing people. He approaches very frightened, always trying to run away. At some point, very suddenly, she started talking to him and said that when she came here, she was promised that they would provide her with food, accommodation, and everything she needed for a comfortable stay. But so far, none of this has happened. She has not eaten for several days. She asked where it all was, for at the moment she had to sleep on the stone floor without food or air, which had not been here since the first moment she had been locked in this room, so she would not be here for long. At that moment, the guy seriously thought about it and remembered that he hadn't even thought that he hadn't left her any food. And all this time she was very hungry, and also was afraid to say it, so as not to anger him or someone else. Surprisingly, the girl is not shy and directly talks about what she is not satisfied. Perhaps she realized that now, he will definitely not harm her. Accordingly, you can demand everything that is missing. She wasn't afraid to make him guilty and talk about how he was a very bad host who didn't even take care of the food. Lily began to get very angry, and it was no wonder, for the girl was very hungry, or any man in her place would have done exactly the same thing, no matter who was in front of him. In response, the guy never said anything. It turns out he was genuinely embarrassed, and also, he decided not to admit how much he enjoyed hearing her voice, even when she was screaming and indignant. She said that all this time, she was waiting for some of his helpers to bring her food, but in the end, no one came to her. She doesn't know how long until she passes out or gets a headache. Is actually very serious, so seeing a person just ignore those words becomes even more unbearable than being hungry. At one point, a miracle happened. Theodore thought that perhaps she might be very cold here. The girl said that it was indeed so, and wished she had more comfortable surroundings. Instead of getting angry, he said he didn't mean to be so horrible to her and would like to apologize. Plus, his eyes are blue now, which means the guy is totally calm. The girl was afraid that he would become very aggressive, but everything went even better than she had planned. Surprisingly, he admitted his guilt and promised to improve himself. She wanted to take care of him again, for now he was nothing like the beast she had seen him yesterday. At this point, she started waiting for him to offer her something to eat, because they had discussed it and there was no result. Theodore might be thinking about it right now. It would be nice if he offered her a room in his palace and provided daily meals, when suddenly, she remembered again that she might make him angry and began to be a little afraid. For in the last few minutes, she had said too many things to him. Lily noticed that despite everything she saw him to be, he was a very handsome guy, for whom she was gradually developing feelings. He's really very handsome, and if it weren't for his insanity, he'd be perfect for any girl. She'd even thought about working something out, finding a way to cure him of his insanity and someday marry him. But for now, it was just dreams. It's too early to think about that, because right now, we need to at least survive and find a method to help him get rid of the problem. I really wonder if she'll be able to hide the fact that she's starting to really like the guy. The girl saw him in a quiet mood and started to fall in love at first sight. Even now, she's talking to him, and at the same time, she's thinking about what a great relationship they could have. Except, chances are, once she sees him mad again, all those feelings will be gone in a flash and never reappear. There's another problem, even two. Somehow, he might suspect that she's not the one he invited to his estate, and the second problem, he might just meet another, similar, girl with pink hair. If that happens, it will be a very big problem that will be impossible to solve even if you wanted to. So the only way to stay here for a long time, and to make him have feelings and not pay attention to other girls, and also to make him not interested in anyone else but her, is to make him fall in love with you, and to do it as soon as possible. Actually, it's a very good idea, but unfortunately, no one gives guarantees that it will definitely work. So the first thing the girl did was to start talking to him in a very pleasant voice. She acts like nothing happened and she likes being here. She stopped accusing him of anything and pretending that something was wrong. The guy noticed it right away and asked why she stopped resenting him, because just now it was as if she hated him and wanted revenge. Lily explained that it was just hunger, because when she was hungry she was never in the mood to eat. At some point she didn't realize she'd passed out and couldn't stand up. Now she'd have to eat something, get her strength back, and then she could help him. Very interesting what he would do in this situation and whether he would even call for help, since he's never done it and doesn't know how it happens. For now, he's just looking at it from the outside and trying to make sense of the situation. He's never had to help anyone in his entire life, especially in a situation like this. He started looking around and remembering how his assistants usually acted in all sorts of situations. Usually, they were very quick to approach him and try to call for a doctor, or at least carry him to a bed. But unfortunately, there isn't a proper room nearby. And to take her to the mansion, you'd have to at least get another person to help you. At one point, she suddenly felt better. Lily opened her eyes and asked what had happened to her. She didn't remember anything and didn't understand why she woke up on the floor. The guy obviously didn't expect it. He doesn't even know how to explain it. He's really embarrassed that she saw him just standing there doing nothing. But luckily the girl didn't even notice it. She suddenly stood up and even started smiling as if nothing had happened. Lily turned to him and suggested that she cheer up a little. For without food, the only way she could do that was to arrange a little warm-up or something like that. When suddenly, instead of doing any exercise, she started running towards the exit as fast as she could. He didn't have time to react. He didn't think that she would try to get away from him again and it would happen now. Theodore forgot that he had closed the door behind him and regretted it very much. He thought it was more likely that Lily was so hungry that she ran to ask for food. He didn't even have a thought that she did it for any other reason. At some point, the girl stumbled and he didn't even notice. The guy was barely on his feet and hadn't even started to catch up to her yet. Lily saw this and realized that she might be able to escape from here. Except, I wonder if she means escape from the mansion or just from this room to find food. Theodore didn't expect her to be so fast, because yesterday she couldn't even get a few meters away. Surprisingly, he doesn't even try to catch up with her. He walks to the door and looks around calmly, as if he has no desire to do so, though he's probably just confident in his guards and knows she won't be able to run away. And even if she tries to do that, she'll be stopped and sent back to that room. So there's no point in running and trying to catch up with her. Though it's more likely the girl is just really hungry and trying to find a kitchen, she realized the guy was taking his time to feed her and decided to take care of it right now.